All right, today we're going to dive into what is, for so many people, one of the biggest and most personal questions you can ever ask. It really sits at the heart of faith and doubt and just what it means to be human. And the question is this: if there's a good God, why is there so much suffering in the world? In this explainer, we're going to walk through a theological framework that tries to give an answer to that exact question.
This isn't some abstract philosophical puzzle. For a lot of folks, this is the single biggest hurdle to having any kind of faith. It's that question that just pops up when things go terribly wrong, when life makes absolutely no sense, and when what you're experiencing seems to totally contradict the idea of a loving, all-powerful creator.
And this is not just a theoretical thing. These words, they actually come from a pastor named Grant Patrick. He's talking about a moment when he was just leaning against the hospital wall. He'd just been with the family of a 14-year-old girl named Maya who was fighting a really rare form of cancer. For him, this wasn't some debate. It was this raw, painful collision between what he believed and this absolutely heartbreaking reality right in front of him.
Yeah, and that's really the core of it, isn't it? This question is not abstract. It is deeply, deeply personal. And according to our source, it's a moment that sooner or later is coming for every single one of us. It's that moment where everything we believe gets put to the ultimate test by what we experience in real life.
So you've got this major conflict right at the heart of the issue. On one side, you have the belief in a good and loving God, and on the other side, you have the brutal, messy reality of life on what feels like a broken planet. Patrick even shares his own story of having a tennis career just cut short by an injury, and of course, the unimaginable pain of Maya's family as they watch their daughter suffer. These are the moments that just force the question.
Okay, but here's where things take a really interesting turn. Instead of seeing evil and suffering as proof against God, this framework completely flips the script. It suggests that our very ability to recognize something as evil might actually point towards God's existence.
So here's how that logic works. To call something evil, like cruelty or injustice, you are, whether you realize it or not, appealing to some kind of objective standard of what is good. You're basically saying, this is not how things are supposed to be. Well, that standard, that sense of supposed to be, points to a moral law. And if a moral law exists, the argument goes, then it had to have come from a moral lawgiver.
So the big idea here is that the very tool people often use to argue against God, the existence of evil, actually relies on a foundation of objective good that, from this point of view, only really makes sense if God exists. Now, of course, a philosophical point like this doesn't take away the sting of pain, not at all, but it does offer a different way to start thinking about the question itself.
So with that idea on the table, the source gives us two core beliefs from a Christian worldview to help navigate the reality of suffering. And the first one is a really powerful idea. In this framework, pain is never, ever pointless. To explain this, the source points us to a story in the Bible. Jesus tells his disciples, hey, get in that boat and cross the lake. But the text says something really specific. It says he made them go. And here's the kicker. Jesus knew a violent storm was about to hit. He knowingly and purposefully sent his closest friends straight into a really difficult, really frightening situation.
And here we see the purpose behind it all. After Jesus comes and calms the storm, the disciples see him in a totally new light. Their understanding of who he is has been stretched, it's been deepened. That storm, as terrifying as it was, had a point. It was meant to lead them to a place of awe and worship that they just couldn't have gotten to on calm waters.
And that right there is the central distinction. The promise isn't a painless life. The promise is a life where even the absolute worst suffering can be used for a greater purpose. And this goes right back to Maya, that 14-year-old girl with cancer. She actually prayed that if she had to go through this, that God would use her story, especially in her father's life. And he later came to faith, a purpose that she was able to see fulfilled.
So if the first idea is that pain isn't pointless, the second one is maybe even bigger. This is the ultimate source of hope in this theological framework, the belief that all pain has an expiration date. No matter how intense it is, no matter how long it lasts, it is not the end of the story.
To really feel the weight of this, just look at the staggering losses of a man named Horatio Spafford back in the 1800s. First, he lost his business. Then, his only son died. And then, in a tragedy that is just unthinkable, all 4 of his daughters died when their ship sank in the Atlantic Ocean.
So, Spafford gets on a ship to go meet his grieving wife. At one point, the captain comes to him and says they're passing over the very spot where his daughters had died. And in that moment, he wrote these words. How is that even possible? Well, according to the source, it's because his hope was fixed on a reality that was bigger than his present pain, the belief that death wasn't the end and that he would see his family again. You see, this belief, this idea that pain is temporary, it's rooted in the Bible's description of how the story finally ends. This vision from the book of Revelation promises a future where God himself puts an end to suffering forever. It says there will be no more death, no more mourning, no more crying, and no more pain.
So, the solution being presented here doesn't for a second deny that pain is a real, constant part of living in a broken world. Instead, it confronts that reality with a two-part hope, that your pain isn't meaningless and it isn't forever.
So at the end of the day, this theological answer doesn't offer some simple bumper sticker fix that makes all the pain just disappear. What it does offer is a way to reframe it, to see it not as just random, cruel chaos, but as something that, while being deeply and truly painful, can have a purpose right now and has a definite end in the future.
So maybe, based on the framework we've just looked at, the ultimate question isn't whether we can avoid pain, it's this. Can a story that is so defined by suffering still, somehow, have a good and meaningful ending?